Thank you for joining this session on Lessons of Leadership. The two distinguished leaders in the room. But first, I'm Laura Liswood, the Secretary General of the Council of Women World Leaders. And of course, I must acknowledge President Vigdis, dear friend, and co-founder of the Council of Women World Leaders, and also the first chair of the Council of Women World Leaders. Briefly, the Council of Women World Leaders is a council of women presidents and prime ministers, which we now have 76 members. Some of our members are here today. And so if any of you out in the audience are freely elected head of state or head of government, you will be invited to join the council. So I encourage you to do that. But let me tell you that we have two wonderful leaders here today. We have far left, my far left, President Dalia Grybauskaitė, the former president of Lithuania, and Chair Emerita, recent Chair Emerita of the Council of Women World Leaders. And then we have Minister Obi Ezekwesili, who was a presidential candidate in 2019 in Nigeria, Minister of Education, a Minister of Solid Minerals. She was the co-founder of Transparency International and is, I think, one of the organizers, right, of Bring Back Our Girls in Nigeria. So please welcome both of these panelists. Good. So this is about leadership, and famous author in the United States, Gary Willis, said, show me your leaders and you bear your soul. And the best definition of leadership I ever saw or read came from what Vivaldi said made the best composer. He said the best composer has a cool head and a hot heart. And in other words, that you have a passion for what you're doing and you're able to translate it into action. So I'm going to ask both of you, please, is what trait, characteristic, skill that you have used most as a woman leader to be successful? I'll start with you, Madam President.
I think all of us, we know what we're using as leaders, no matter where we are. In politics is, again, additional specificity, and sometimes it depends very much on concrete situation in concrete country. For me personally, and I can ground myself only on my personal experience, I can say it was courage, because I went into office during the crisis, economic crisis. Courage and exaggerated feeling of responsibility. I'm saying this because that's exactly the reason why I went to this kind of position. And if you take responsibility, and as much as you take responsibility, as much you take power.
So let me just follow up that question with, how had you seen your courage tested?
Oh, it was tested every day, every minute, and by everybody. But in reality, it was a challenge, which was important for everybody at that time, for everyone in my country and for me. It was tested by people, by the journalists, by public opinions, by external neighborhood. So, but that's exactly why you're going into difficult times, if you agree to take these responsibilities on yourself. So I think that without reason, without courage, without going out from security zone, better not to become a leader, especially a political one.
Just stay home.
Just stay home.
Okay. So, Madam Minister, how would you respond?
I would say fearlessness. Fearlessness, that sense that the only thing that you should fear is fear itself. I also, empathy, plenty of empathy. That sense that I can put myself in the shoes of someone who's going through a condition or a situation that I don't find acceptable. And then analytical sense. I'm able to connect dots. I like to look at things from a logical frame and to see how empirically I can figure out the fastest way to solve the problem. And sacrifice. I was raised by a dad who told me that privilege means that I cannot luxuriate in my own issues. I must be willing to lay down my privilege in order to give others the opportunity that I have had.
And you've had many challenges in your country. Plenty.
Plenty.
So,
as a young person, I started to challenge military rule in my country. It was said to be suicidal to try to stand up against people with a gun. But as far as I was concerned, as a child who watched other countries looking better, I didn't see any reason why military rule should be entrenched in my country. And so I did exactly what I had been raised to do, use my voice. I used my voice.
Yeah. It's interesting, both of you have touched on what Howard Gardner in his book, Leading Minds, says are the 4 traits of great leaders. He says the first is that they have a true north, a sense of values, and both of you have articulated that. The second is they're willing to challenge authority, which I know you also did in Lithuania. Third was that they used their voice, that they communicated, and which is interesting because standing up and speaking in front of people can be require quite a bit of courage. The number 1 fear of Americans is public speaking. Right. Number 2 is snakes, but whatever. And the fourth was that they were willing to travel. And by that he meant traveled outside of their worldview, which is empathy. Madam President, how were you able to travel? How were you able to get outside your own worldview?
You have no choice, really. If you want not only to fulfill your goals while you're going to office or while you are in office, you need to listen and learn every day. You cannot think that you know everything finally. You're learning every moment, every day, and it's mainly about people who were teaching me every day and giving me strength and energy. I was asked why I am energetic. I said, because of you, because you needed me to be strong. And that's the people whom you need to reflect in your actions. So that's the main probably rules of leadership, to work and to reply and to be together with the needs of people and concrete situation in your country. And not only in country, because security, for example, challenges, in our case, in my country's case, was also external challenges.
Well, right, you had external threats. You've had internal threats, and you've had external threats.
We have both.
Yeah, well,
Internally, we are creating problems ourselves. Outside or externally, somebody else is creating problems for us. So, but we need to challenge both.
Right. And I remember when talking to women leaders, every one of them said, given the kind of scrutiny that they faced as women leaders as compared to men leaders, that they had to have a passion for what they were doing, or they would give up the passion. What have you observed about how society evaluates a woman as a leader versus evaluating a man as a leader? What have you observed? Same, different?
No, it's not the same at all. I think there is always this sense to delegitimize the authenticity of female leadership. And sometimes it's not because people want to be nasty. It's simply because it is unusual for women to lead in the eyes of society. And so it's important that women have been producing pioneers amongst them, as women have become leaders of countries and made a success of their leadership. It has basically become counterfactual evidence to those who think that women cannot lead or do not have the skills of leadership. I always say that leadership is gender neutral. All the skills and the tools that you need for leadership can be found in both males and females. And so when I look at women who are pioneering in industry, in the business world, in government, in the communities, they really are doing a great work, because what they're doing is they're setting the stage for the younger generation to not have the same kind of doubts and all kinds of barriers, whether they are social, religious, whether they are cultural, stuck against them.
And so, Madam President, what have you seen in terms of how people are evaluating you as a leader versus how they would evaluate a male leader, and how you have to exhibit your traits of leadership?
It is a little bit difficult to look from outside because I was all the time inside this role. But at least my experience said and showed the practices that the more difficult times are coming into country, the more women coming up, the more responsibility they're taking on their shoulders. And as I'm saying, not only to the restaurant, women needs to be first, but usually for critical and crisis situation, women is first. And that was the case in my country's case. And during this time, we had president, defense minister, finance minister, and speaker of the house, all women, because it was minus 15 GDP. Very difficult time.
Yeah.
And nobody wanted to go into this mess because there was no glory in it. Now it's more peaceful time, and now not many women, not so much women in office in Lithuania anymore. But my experience is the more difficult times are, the more women coming up, and they are not afraid to take these responsibilities. The more peaceful time, they are just trying not to be too active and going their own way and doing their own things and not taking so much public positions.
So who really needs a leader when everything is okay? It's when there is crisis that true leadership manifests. And that's why, your situation was that way. So kudos to the women.
Yes, some people call that the crumbling cliff theory of leadership, which is just when the cliff is crumbling, people say, oh, well, let's try a woman leader now, right? The challenge, of course, of that is that you are now in a crisis, which means that it's harder. And if women are already being over-scrutinized for their ability to succeed, you put them into a situation that's more difficult to succeed in the first place. And therefore people go, well, we tried this woman and it really didn't work.
Which is why women need to build very strong support system. Because when women lead, it's not just that single woman leading. There's got to be a community of leadership around her. And that sort of makes it a lot easier to take the very terrible challenges that come with being this person that everyone is looking up to provide the solutions. And since you know that you are not the monopolist of all solutions, you need that community around you. And that's the support system.
And how do you both, how have you both evolved in terms of being a leader to handling the criticism? I remember talking to one prime minister who had said, when at first others would criticize her and say, oh, you're stupid, you don't know what you're doing. And she would just go, oh my God, am I stupid? I don't know what I'm doing. And then after about 2 months, she goes, no, you're more stupid than me. How have you both evolved in your ability to handle this kind of thing?
Don't trust if anybody will say to you that it is not hurting. It's always hurting. But it's how you manage it and how you use it then for your work to be supported. So that's, of course, it was not pleasant, but I was looking to this as a possibility to teach myself and learn what maybe is going not exactly the case it should be. And we have this pain of taking criticism as objective environment. And sometimes not objective because you knew that it is oligarchs or corruption behind it, but because you knew more or less sources why you were from, you were able to use this as a framework or as a signals where you're doing okay, or maybe you need to change something. But in general, you need to learn how to psychologically protect yourself. Otherwise, you will be paralyzed and not able to do your job as a leader, because the level of attacks also depends on how much you react. If you will be too sensitive, overreacting, the pressures and criticism only will grow. So you need to show that you understand the reasons, you're able to learn, and you are not influenced in your decision making by these kind of, let's say, pressures.
So, so I compartmentalize criticisms, right? So one box, I find the ones that are constructive, and those ones I am learning from them because they're sort of giving me feedback, and feedback is important for effective leadership. And then there's the other box that's got all of the silly ones, those who really want to, they're throwing that at you so that they can delegitimize you. And I simply say to that box, you make me laugh. You know, and so by doing this, what I do is that I build within my psychological construct a sense that it's okay to receive the feedback and to do something different from what I am doing because it's healthy. And then for the other ones, when it's not making me laugh, but actually making me feel sore, I am able to open up my vulnerability to those that are closest to me. So there are some that would make me cry. And it's comforting to be able to cry, you know, with those that understand why I'm crying. And you need to be able to cry sometimes as a leader, especially as a woman leader. Don't get into this nonsense that because you're a leader, you shouldn't cry. That's crap.
You heard it here, crap. And I would posit the theory that men should be able to cry too with that. So each one of you, both of you have been great leaders. And I remember asking a military general, you know, what would you say is the most important thing to do to become a leader? And he just turned to me and said, practice. Just practice being a leader. But what would you say? I mean, we've got some incredible leaders out here. We've got some budding leaders out here. What would you wish you had known starting out as a leader?
No, I'm happy that I didn't knew how hard it will be. Otherwise, I will never go. No, it's better not to know. Better just take responsibility, have a goal, and not ever be afraid to do it. And if you go to office, you go to do, but not to be. That's the main thing you need to have in mind. But better not to know what will wait for you.
So I'm thinking so hard what I wish I had known. I probably wish I wish I knew how to say, no, I'm not doing.
No.
You know, because, you know, this sense that we as women, when there's a problem to be solved and people are just looking at it, and we can't just keep looking at it, right. We find ourselves wanting to change the situation. I wish I had the capacity to say, no, I'm not doing.
I remember a woman had a pillow that said, no is a complete sentence. Yeah.
I agree.
Time has gone very quickly. As I'm sure you can understand and see why these women have become such great leaders. And please join me in thanking them for their leadership.